Thank you. So I'm going to talk about how we did things differently. I've recently joined the National Osteoporosis Society. Prior to that, I actually led the service in Birmingham, so actually set it up. We also published some data in as well. So I've also got Lauren with me today, so please be gentle with her. She's our fracture liaison administration apprentice, and she's our database whiz. So I brought her here to answer all the hard questions. So the thing I'd like to say about the fracture liaison service in the National Osteoporosis Society is that now there are quite a few service development team. So we're spread across the country. So if you are having difficulties or you need some help or you want to look at your patient population in regards to are you seeing enough patients that are fractured, or to understand that data, we can certainly help you with that. So please be in touch. Anyway, this is the QE. It's a new building, and it's 1,400 beds. It's got 100 ITU beds, so and it's a major trauma centre, so it has quite a few patients come through. So what we had an operational database that we started before the FLS-DB was actually set out for us to input into. So I like data, and my team would probably admit that I was a bit overzealous with the amount of data we collected. But as with any new service, you want to prove that you're doing what you said you would do for the commissioners. So I had about 160 fields, and my staff were like, seriously? But they were colour-coded, so they could go through and follow it through. So we had the NOS come to have a look at our database, and overall it was very well filled in. And they said, are you mad? You don't need to do this. And we've got the FLS-DB coming on board. And what we found was with our first upload, there was loads and loads of errors. And it was a bit, oh my goodness, why are all these errors coming back? We had a massive purple line and we were like, what's going on here? And basically our operational database, so how we'd worded things, was very different from how the FLS-DB had worded things. And we'll go through some of that in a little while about actually our journey about how we change things so it actually the wording and language aligns. So we had, with the help of the National Osteoporosis Society, they actually helped us embed the FLS-DB within our own database. Woo, I think we're in the wrong room. I'm not doing a jig. That's not what they said. So can you still hear me over the noise? So what we did was actually work with them and embedded the FLS-DB within our operational database. We weren't doing things twice. We were doing it once, but to feed to our commissioners and also to the FLS-DB. And what we found was that with their version 2, we had less errors, but we were still having some errors. So then we've tweaked it again, and our third version was in October. So actually now we're having very few errors. So hopefully we can show how we've moved on and actually didn't wait for the report to come out for us to realise things were not going as we should or would have liked. So this is us. We did have, we've still got some reds, and we acknowledge that, and there's some yellows. So one thing that we're really pleased about, that even with the first database, that actually the completeness of data was quite good. So we felt there was some good things there, but we didn't quite, some of it was a bit of a shock. Did any of you find, how did I get a red there, or how did I get an amber? Where's that come from? I thought I was doing quite well in that. So some of it was a bit of a shock when it came out, but we've looked at it and worked through to try and understand how that happened. So in terms of our DEXA referrals, as one of them is that actually we didn't realise we didn't put the date of DEXA in. And when you look at it, we said, well, sure, it made sense that we should have put the date of DEXA in, so that changed. And actually, when it transferred from one database to the other, that's when it improved. And so we went back and resubmitted. We re-put in the DEXA dates when patients had the DEXAs. Difficulty at 90 days, what we found was people, particularly in our area, went on to further bedded units. So actually they were unable to come back to have their DEXA, and those units didn't have DEXAs. And if there were prolonged illnesses, patients had other appointments, obligations, and reduced mobility where they weren't able to bend their hip to actually come back to have hip scores done. And then we were, well, do we do arm? What do we do with those patients that are not going to do that? Do we need to, are they that frail that actually that's giving us a clinical indication that do we really need a DEXA in the first place, or should we just treat? So some of those other questions really came up about that. So for the patients under 75, so what we've done is we've uploaded from our latest, so this is up to March 17, so you can see from January to June, so up to June, only 50%. So we're on an increase of the number of patients undergoing DEXAs. What this helped us with is actually discussing this with radiology and actually realising when we set up the service, we didn't quite, because of coding, you didn't always know how many patients you would actually have coming through. So actually, how much resource would you need in DEXA? You had a bit of a finger in the air of how many you would need. So actually, what we actually managed to do is then get walk-in DEXA slots. So patients within fracture clinic, we could walk around into DEXA, and that really improved our compliance to people having DEXA, so that really helped. We're now at a 2-week wait for DEXA, which is really good because that gives patients lots of choice about when they're coming. And what we try and do is if they're coming back for other appointments or if they're coming for physio, we try and align it for patients coming back. So it gives a little bit of flexibility around there. The radiology team did an audit of our vertebral fracture assessments and actually showed that we could do more. And actually, again, it's finding those patients who'd had previous vertebral fractures and therefore an increased risk around treating. So now any patient, when they're having a DEXA, if they have a T-score of -3, they automatically have a VFA. So we're lucky enough to have that. So again, what that does is increase the number of vertebral fracture detection that we didn't have before. And as we know from the hip fracture studies, a lot of patients would have had previous fractures of the vertebrae before they had the hip fracture. So we know we need to do more. We've just had a section where we've had a reduced number of, an increased number of DNAs, and for various different reasons. And what we really need to do is get the patients who are inpatients that need DEXAs to have it while they're, so we do have some inpatient slots, but as always, it's can you get them off the ward? Are there porters? Can they bend their hip? So some of that sort of organisational element comes in, so we know that needed to be improved. With the hip fractures, again, when we first started, we worked very closely with the ortho-geriatricians, and we felt maybe it was a bit of a duplication with the NHFD. So actually, are we duplicating what's already collected? Which is why our hip fracture numbers were low. And what we had as a discussion at our local area, that the geriatricians would do the over 75s and we would do the younger patients. So again, that's something that we need to organise between ourselves about how that's collected and the follow-up, and we now do the follow-up in the over 75s as well as the under 75s. Right, I'm going to pass on to Lauren now to talk about the falls bit.
Our FRAT has considerably improved since we've had our first database. We've updated it more to match our performer, what we use in clinic when we're questioning patients. Because we do a falls assessment when we did a bone health assessment. So when we do the national upload, we have most of our data already there because we like to get it when we're with the patient. We like to get the height and the weight to save time later, fill it all in. We have a 4-page long assessment that we do while we're in the clinic trying to get everything down. And what we do is, when we go back, we do ours line by line, and we do an upload once every month. So we do it in bulk. And we find that does work quite well because the errors that do tend to come back seem to be for the same sort of fields. So it's just a case of going in and changing it. And chances are, if you do get 1 or 2 errors that you don't expect, it's for silly things like maybe leaving a space or putting something in that shouldn't quite be there. In terms of our follow-up, again, since our first database, we didn't have a lot of options to put in. We either had, yes, they were for follow-up, or no, they're not. And now with the third database that we've come along, we also have the option to put, they were for follow-up, but we couldn't contact them. So we've got the uncontactable option. Sometimes we call patients, they are for follow-up, but they kindly decline because they might not have the time, they might not be interested, which is silly because we're doing this for their benefit. And sometimes patients have sadly passed away. So it's a lot more suitable to decide an option that is appropriate for your patient and that matches your data set best. We've recently started putting in to improve patient compliance a date and a time. So they expect a call from us at 4 and 12 months, and we find that this has definitely improved patient compliance to answering the phone because they expect it come in and they know we're going to be calling them, compared to when it was just you're going to get a follow-up at 4 months or 12 months. Now they expect a call off us, and we always ask after the 4 months, are you still happy for us to contact you at 12 months? Just remind them that we have given them a date and time, and most of them are very, very happy to be contacted. So looking back at uploading, I think the 5 top tips for me would definitely be check your spelling, punctuation and grammar, making sure everything's spelled correctly, making sure you're not putting in an extra comma or an extra space, because that tends to be a lot of what the errors come back for, that you've put something in that you shouldn't have put, or we've found as well that having a proforma that matches the layout of the database, that if you set it out in a way that you know your first fields are patient name, patient number, if you follow it exactly through with your proforma, you'll find it a lot easier inputting and uploading. That's what we've definitely found. And if it's possible, use your drop boxes. If you click the little arrow and select your option, it will definitely minimise the chance of human error and make it as easy as possible, as quick as it can be to putting in your data. Because when you've got loads of fields to fill in, it does take a lot of time up. And we found that it's also might be useful if you've got IT on hand to help them block out some of the options that are not needed. So if you put no in, for example, with the falls assessment, if you say no, don't know if anyone's noticed, it will block out the rest of it when you go to upload, so you won't have a falls assessment included.
So that's difficult if you've done a partial assessment. So if you've done a partial assessment, you need to say yes rather than no, because it will block everything out and then you can't add anything in.
Which is why we find if you're putting in no, you know that you're not going to need to fill it in, and it reassures you that you haven't missed anything out, and you can carry on to your next section. And like I said earlier, we upload ours in bulk. We do it at the end of every month. And it does usually come back quite positive. And like I said, if there's any fatal errors that come back, the big scary word you see written in red across your screen, it's usually you've put a slash in the wrong place or you've missed a number out. So they would be my 5 top tips, and I stick by them religiously.
Thank you, Lauren. And just to give you an idea, we're at what was about 2,000 inputs now,
Yes.
and the last one came back with 11 minor errors. So we can live with that. We're really happy with that. So what I would say is, if you're going to have an operational database, I can't advise you strongly enough that actually do one and design one that actually has the FLS-DB parts in it, so you can download. So you're entering it once, but for two different reasons. In terms of where we are now, we've had we in June last year, one of our nurses left, so which was outrageous, and so what we had to do was actually reduce our service back to doing outpatients, because we knew that the ortho-Jerrys would do all the hips. So actually, one of the things for me was actually if there was some way you could record or let the FLS-DB, or it would know that if there was a change in what you'd increased in what you put in your facilities audit due to operational issues that happen that are out of your control, that actually reduces the number of patients you would see versus what you would expect to be seen. So in terms of that, we're actually improving on our falls assessments, our DEXAs, the patients that are on medication. So basically, for all the national data, we're actually now achieving slightly higher than what the national data is showing. So from what we've found is actually that works for us, but each area and how your service is set up, there's such variation you need to work out, most importantly, what would work for you.